How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast. In a blink of an eye, the college football season is over, and Ohio State is the last team standing. Myself, Nick Rice, are here to talk about the National Championship and the NFL Conference Championship games coming this weekend. Nick, it's good to see you. I'm glad you are safe. How's everything going, man?
Pretty good. Yeah, I'm not too far away from LA for folks that have been years into the podcast and still don't know where we are. But yeah, right near the disasters, but not at them. But, we're all good. Can't say the same for Reddick or some of the other guys, unfortunately. We're all certainly hoping that they were able to recover. But yeah, for a lot of us here, we're doing all right.
Yeah, just some of the stories you hear. I mean, the Reddick one, of course, you're going to see because it's a sports figure, but just some of the stories that you hear out there. We're used to the water version of destruction down here, but to see, because you've heard about fires, big forest sweeping fires out west, but rarely does it get to, houses and homes and people. So it's been crazy. So again, I'm glad you're doing all right. I think most of your family said doing well. Your brother that lives closer is doing good. So hopefully we are past the worst of this, and there's already been enough damage that hopefully it stops there. So that's kind of one of the main reasons. We took a week off. We took the divisional round off because we wanted to make sure everything was good there. We didn't want to bother trying to plan anything. But now that everything's good, we can get back to the stuff that matters less, but it's the stuff that entertains us at least.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And what's kind of wild, because, years ago, being in Florida with you, man, it was crazy. When the storms would come through, how windy it is and everything. It's windier here. We've had like 80-mile-an-hour gusts, and it's been insane. Like the perfect storm, So, pretty intense stuff going on here. We certainly hope everything's all right.
Yeah, hopefully we've gotten through the worst of it. It's not often that we start recording and we are able to report on breaking news, but as of about 50 minutes ago, the Baseball Hall of Fame announced the class of 2025, which will include 3 people, and I'm just going to quickly run through them just because not very often do we get stuff popping up like this. Pitching great CC Sabathia of the Cleveland Indians, Brewers, and Yankees. He is most known, for my chagrin, as the missing piece from the Yankees 2009 World Series team that beat my Phillies. But he was clearly the missing piece that put them over the hump. Is still their most recent championship. Ichiro Suzuki, the legendary Japanese outfielder, he will go down as the first Japanese player to make it into the Hall, beloved by many people. And then also pitching great Billy Wagner to round out the 3 people in the Hall of Fame this year. So baseball does it a little different than, if you're not aware, they don't have a set number of people that get in every year the way the NFL and maybe the NBA does. They have to reach a certain number of votes to get in, and there are odd years where just nobody gets in. So to get in at all, that's why it's such a small class. Sometimes it's nobody at all. Sometimes it's 8 people. You never really know. So it's definitely one of the more tougher leagues to get in their Hall of Fame, I would say. So congrats to those 3 that are now immortalized in Cooperstown. And while we're talking baseball, too, we should do a quick RIP shout-out to the great Bob Uecker, the announcer that passed away at 90. I grew up knowing him as Harry Doyle from Major League. He was that comedic, just a bit outside that guy. But, the longtime radio voice of the Milwaukee Brewers. And everyone kind of wishes that their hometown announcer was a little more like Bob Uecker. The guy proved that you can be funny and kind of express yourself in the booth. And I think anyone that's stood behind a microphone at any point has tried to take a little bit of Bob Uecker, but with them when they sit behind a microphone. So RIP again to one of the greats in baseball. But I just wanted to touch on those newer pieces of news here before we get to the football news. So Ohio State wins the national championship over Notre Dame. The score makes it look a little closer than it is, but Ohio State was definitely the better team. And they kind of, after that first drive from Notre Dame, it just kind of seemed like it was all Buckeyes.
Yeah, before our last show, before the Final Four game, I had talked about how Ohio State to some degree kind of feels like the 2014 Ezekiel Elliott, JT Barrett team, where they had a lot of great players that turned out to be wonderful NFL guys, but their story was just as amazing. And for Ohio State this year, just like they did that year, they had to win down the stretch. I mean, they took a couple losses early in the year and they had to turn around. And they figured out a way to just kind of sneak in there, and there were no ones picked to win it all. I had looked at the amount of injuries they had. That was my reason why I didn't think they'd win it. But once they began the playoff with a huge win, it kind of felt like maybe this team turned a corner, and they clearly showed that beginning in January or late December, really, they were like as good as any team in college football. So they earned it, and Jeremiah Smith cemented himself as one of the best wide receivers coming into the draft. Just a wonderful, they peaked at the right time and just a wonderful run to the title.
Yeah, peaking at the right time is really important here, because in any year prior to now, they would have peaked just too late, because that loss to Michigan and not making the Big Ten championship game probably keeps them out in any other year. I think even if it's a 4-team playoff, they maybe are sitting at number 5. They sneak in to this at number 8, and they had probably the toughest run to get there, because they had to, let me make sure I get this right. Number 9, Tennessee, they beat 42-17. They beat the number 1 overall seed and undefeated Oregon by 20, 41-21. Then they played Texas, beat them by 2 touchdowns. And again, while the final score in Atlanta was 34-23, they, after the opening drive, they scored 34 unanswered points, and then Notre Dame scored a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to make it look a little closer towards the end. And there was a minute there that it's like, maybe you got to stay up and watch the end of this. The choice to kick a field goal that ended up missing really did them in towards the end. I will admit, though, I don't think I've ever gone into a game rooting for Notre Dame, but this is easily, though they fell short, the most likable Notre Dame team, I think, of our lifetime. I think Marcus Freeman has earned everybody's respect. This is a guy that was put into this position after Brian Kelly left, saying he needed to go somewhere where he could possibly win a national championship. And 2 years later, the team that he left was in the national championship, while LSU didn't even make the playoff. So I think they're a very likable team. Riley Leonard, the whole story of breaking his leg at Duke against Notre Dame of all schools, and going to Notre Dame after the fact, kind of a weird tidbit there. But probably easily one of the people liked Monte Teo, I think, back in the 2013, 2012 championship game that they were in, but I don't think that team was as likable. I think this team earned everybody's respect through this run. That Penn State game, I think, was the best game of this playoff to me. The Penn State Notre Dame game was easily the best one in my opinion. But let's just talk for a minute here. Well, also Ryan Day, where after that loss to Michigan, people were ready to run him out of town. And, it's interesting where this goes from here to see. He has half a mind to say, see, I did it, and then, walk out the door and go somewhere else. But Chip Kelly, also an offensive coordinator, finally winning his eluded national championship that's eluded him all his career. So we have now completed our first 12-team playoff. Now that it's over and done with, what are the biggest glaring things you would change, and what did you like about this setup?
What I like about the setup, first, I have to think a while about. But my immediate reaction is too many teams. And, because it's starting to feel a lot more like obviously I love the NFL, but it's starting to feel a lot more like a marathon versus a sprint. And after watching this season, I'd be interested in seeing how August and September looks in college football. Do we get a very similar feel to that of, the NFL, where the first month or 2 months of the year, you can't take any result seriously? I mean, Buffalo got humiliated by Baltimore in week 5, and then they turn around and beat him. And that happens. But I think that'll start to happen a lot more in college football. If you can have a team that doesn't even make their conference championship game win the entire thing. So, there's pluses and minuses to it. But I hate to kind of, not play along. But I can't think of a plus right now. That's all I can think of. Just too many teams. Even though Ohio State won it, great for them. But this was a marathon. And by the time we got to the end of the marathon, like we've been saying on the, lead up to this in our pre-production, very official pre-production meetings, there was no buzz for this game tonight. And I think the fact that the season was so long has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, you mentioned the first thing is you feel like it's too many teams. Well, joke's on you, because there's a very good chance it's going to be 14 next year instead of 12. That's already in talk.
Next year?
That's already in talk. It might not happen by there. If they can help it, they might do it that way. But my biggest takeaway from this is they said when they were going to expand this that it was going to make the regular season matter more. And it clearly did not do that. Because again, Ohio State losing 2 games, Notre Dame losing to NIU would have kept them out of a 4, of a 6, of an 8. Clearly they're good teams. And I think we need to get rid of we need to find the 4 best teams. No, we have to find the X amount of number of teams that have played the best this year. Because if you're just going on paper, why does it matter? That's like why play an NFL season, just give it to the Chiefs every year. They still have to win the games. So the way I view it too is like it matters less in the regular, because you can drop a game or two. Ohio State now knows that. Everybody in a way gets the Alabama treatment that if you win enough games but don't go to your conference championship game, and I think they're in jeopardy too. I think we might hit a point where conference championship games are no more because they don't really have a benefit anymore. And it might just be whoever has the best record at the end of the regular season for a conference is their conference champion. And the Big 12 did that up until like 5 years ago or so. So there's a premise for that. But what this does do, my other biggest takeaway, is it forces college football teams to do something they've never had to do. And that's play great football for a month straight. Because most college schedules are set up so that you might have a big kickoff game, but then you get an FCS opponent, and then you get I don't know, I don't want to pick on it, a UTEP, and then you play like a bottom feeder in your conference, and then you have a big rival. And then you play, Western Michigan, and then you play another good team in your conference. But there's always ups and downs to it. Once that playoff starts, you have to win 4 games in a row against other ranked teams that are just as good, if not better than you. So the fact that Ohio State was able to do that means, yes, you already said it, they got hot at the right time, which is how every other sports playoff works, right? That's how the Giants were able to win 2 Super Bowls with Eli Manning. That's how Nick Foles was able to catch fire, even though that we were the best team all year. It changes your philosophy that you have to be battle tested and ready to go through. Like, if I could rename this, just call it the month of hell. Because if you're going to win, you have to go through a month of hell against ranked teams that have also gone through just as much, if not more than you. So it really does change. I think it'll change how rosters are constructed. It'll definitely change schedule builds for sure. I think the longer this goes, it will be set up more the way NFL is. Like, yeah, you can drop a game or two. And you got to be built to win your division, because winning your division sets you up in the playoffs, and you got to be built to win the playoffs. So I think it will change how people build rosters. It'll change how schedules are made, and you have to be ready for that month of hell, which I would like to trademark at this moment.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, we're getting on that nice and early. And to be honest, after seeing what Ohio State did, I think you're onto something there. But what's hilarious is that for fans that were to, and I hate to sabotage this whole segment into a negativity on college football playoff, but we got some, monkeys to get off our back here.
Yeah.
And another thing, like, think about this, and I never brought this up in all of our shows, but now I think this is going to be a narrative. When you go into this year thinking, all right, we're up to 12 teams. What do you think going in? Like, I would have thought was the best benefit to me would have been, okay, teams are more compelled to schedule a lot of power programs in the preseason. So that way, they're best prepared for the playoffs, right? But what I think is going to happen is actually the opposite. Yeah. I think teams are going to want to schedule less tough opponents, knowing that we can warm up the whole year. We don't want to get anyone hurt and peak in the playoff. And to me, I think that is incredibly dangerous. We've already had this trend of teams and players that either opt out of bowl games or opt out of conference championships. And it just is getting crazy to me. I'm not my get off my lawn type of guy. I love, some things about, where we're going, but this is one I'm having a hard time getting my head around, because, man, there was nothing quite like, college football in October, November, knowing you had to win or you were out.
Yeah.
And that is gone now.
Why is my arbitrary time to say in every podcast, if you make a requirement to make the playoff, winning your conference championship games are now de facto playoff games. I can't say it anymore, but I'll probably say it next episode as well. That would solve so many problems, but they're going the opposite way. They're saying we don't even need conference championships anymore. I've actually heard this story today that the ACC wants to wants to implement. They want to be the first to try this out. Tell me if you follow this. You're a conference champion at the end of the regular season. I'm just going to use an example. Let's say Clemson wins. They have the best record in the ACC when the season's over. They get an automatic spot, the ACC regular season champ. Then the second best team and the third best team play each other, and the winner, instead of a conference championship week, 2 and 3 play, and the winner gets the ACC's second spot.
I already hate it.
You hate it. Okay. It intrigues me in general, but then I remembered we're talking football and not basketball, because that sounds like something, or baseball even. That's something college baseball would do 100%. But
for sure.
So basically, you're replacing college championship week with like a play-in Sunday, play-in Saturday type scenario. So that doesn't intrigue you at all. You hate it already?
No, and I'm not even, going to these games really. And to just think for the fans, it's like, hey, we've added an extra random game. Here's 3 days to sell tickets. The more and more we do that, to me, the lesser the product is, and the harder it is to get butts and seats too. And I think we kind of saw that a little bit. Granted, some of it was weather related, but in the playoff, there was a lot of that kind of. Not a lot of games were jazzed late in the year, so not a huge fan. Back to the original point, college football needs to be more like what it used to be, of where every game matters. And I don't know who these pollsters are, but apparently they're the most important people in the world now. Who do we think are the best 12 teams in the playoff? Forget about the records and the results and who won the conference. Let's go by the eye test. And those pollsters, man, crazy.
The biggest plus to that scenario I just gave you is it gets rid of the committee doing just that. Everything is decided on the field. Your champion gets in, and your winner of 2 + 3 gets in. We don't need anyone's opinion. These are facts. So that part I did like about it, if that makes sense. But you hit on a
push it back an extra week, the conference title.
No, you don't play the conference title game. You play the play-in game on that instead. Yeah. So it wouldn't change it. You just hit the nail on the head with something that not enough people is talking about. I'm going to use Penn State as an example. They played that first game at home in Happy Valley, right? Still not a sellout because, people aren't used to that extra game at home. But you go from Pennsylvania to Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl. You win that game. You go to the Orange Bowl in Miami. You win that game. You then got to go to Georgia, in this case, for the championship game. I think it's unrealistic to expect even the most diehard of fans to make any of those. And do you think, you beat SMU and then the Fiesta Bowl's coming up? Do you have to decide, do I want to go to that, or do I want to save the money in case we win and go to the Orange Bowl? Or do I save money for that in case we win to go to the national championship and then you lose one of those and you didn't go to any of the games? I think that's a big middle finger and a big, unrealistic expectation for fans to just have the money and the free time. I love going to UCF games. I only go to home games. I know people that, they maybe do one big road trip, especially now that we're in the Big 12. Like, we're going to go to Kansas State. We're going to go to Baylor. We're going to go to TCU. I hear is a great, people love going to that area. But, it's unrealistic to think people they probably already had it figured out. I'm going to go to these games every year and yada, yada. And now you're just expecting people to fly all over the country. Weather was a factor already. That's another thing. This has turned weather for postseason college football, which it's never really had. All these major bowls are typically in nice weather places, but that first round had, Penn State in the snow and everything. So I think it's just really unrealistic for the fans, and not enough people are talking about it.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. If I were to come up with one positive about the college football, because you did ask me that, about the 12-team playoff, is that it does eliminate the problem that 4 had, which was it did feel like that number 5 team could have totally won the whole thing. And clearly the number 8, Ohio State, won the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So we've been going 6 or 8 the whole time. And if I had to choose between 4 or 12, I'd go back to 4. But 12 is not that much worse than 4, considering there are no excuses anymore. Whoever number 13 was, like Bama, was not good enough, not even close, in Miami or whatever. So, there is some benefit to that, and that is the benefit. Every year we can go at season end and say, maybe Ohio State, if it was a 4-team playoff or a BCS, wouldn't have won it, wouldn't have qualified. But they clearly were one of the best teams. They deserve respect, and they won the whole thing.
Yeah, I think the part of the charm of 4 and even back when it was 2 is it was understood teams are getting left out that could have potentially won the whole thing. And I think you maybe prefer that, to your point, than letting teams in that had no real chance. So it solved one problem and created another, as you're saying. I agree with that 100%. You mentioned Ohio State, the 8th seed, made it. Also, the biggest thing they need to change is they need to reseed um, every round. That's another thing that'll affect this weighted bracket that clearly materialized in this here. But to bring it back to Ohio State for a minute, does Ryan Day get a moment where he can say, "See, I did it. Everybody, shut up, get off my back"? And does he get to do that? I mean, I'm not. I had the Penn State jersey on last episode. That's my. If I had a Big Ten team, that's clearly it. Not an Ohio State fan at any point, but do you by chance know Ryan Day's coaching record as a head coach?
Just because they brought it up today, I'm pretty sure it's 70-10.
70-10 out of 80 games. And you know why people hate him? Out of those 10 games, 4 of those losses are to Michigan. So nearly half of his career losses are to the team up north, or whatever they call them over there. So that's the reason. And I get it. Like, especially in college football, it doesn't matter as much in the NFL. Like, if the Steelers win the Super Bowl, nobody would care if they got swept by the Ravens in the regular season. It would bug them at the time. If the Eagles win the Super Bowl but lost to the Cowboys twice, yeah, that would bug you, but you're not going to think about it, right? But there are people out there that if you polled them and were like, would you rather beat Michigan and win the national title? An alarming amount of people would say, I would rather beat Michigan. Like, here's a great example too. The merch is dropped for Ohio State, right? And they do the thing where they put the schedule on the back. Michigan fans are buying this shirt, this Ohio State national championship shirt, because on the back of it, it has the score when Michigan beat them in the last game of the season. That's what we're dealing with here.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of goes back to our whole point at the beginning. College football feels a lot more like a regular season sport. Like, yeah, the playoff is a lot of fun to determine the championship, but there's nothing quite like think about over the years, watching UCF play, watching Penn State play. I'm sure of your top 10 most favorite memories, at least 2/3 of them were big rivalry wins or regular season wins. Do you remember playoff games or bowl games? I mean, maybe a couple, but not really.
You remember bowl games, but like, again, the average fan doesn't go traveling to all these away games, so it's games you've had at home. So for me, it's like, the Black Friday showdown against USF, it was an away game, but like the Hail Mary against East Carolina this past year, the comeback against TCU, those are all regular season things. So yeah, to your point, of course you're going to remember the big ones, but what fills out your memory as a fan is the journey, not just the destination. So I agree. They said that we were going to get into making the regular season matter more, and it clearly matters less. So before you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, college basketball is kind of like that too. You just don't. I just don't like how college football has become that, because only diehards kind of watch every college basketball and every college baseball game. I mean, there's something about college football where it brought in the whole nation. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's like, unless it's Duke, North Carolina, people aren't watching regular season college basketball, to your point. So I agree with that. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we have the NFL Final Four Conference Championship coming up. So stick around. Well, the NFL season is down to 4 as Conference Championship weekend is this Sunday. Games at 3 o'clock on Fox, 6:30 on CBS, as the good Lord intended. I think if anybody tried to tell you, no matter how good you thought Jaden Daniels was going to be, that the Washington Commanders, Redskins football team, whatever you want to call them, were in an NFC Championship game, I'd have to call you a liar that that was going to happen. So before we get to my side of things, the season that Washington's had is incredible. Their win against the Eagles, beating Kenny Pickett, I'm not saying put an asterisk, but like put it into perspective, right? But aside from that, the Hail Mary against the Bears, the rest of their season has just been incredible. So, they deserve all the props in the world for getting this far.
Yeah, most of the year, I kind of, like a lot of fans, put the, comparison to the RG3 2012 special playoff run. But this clears that by, leaps and bounds. This is insane. And going into the game, I felt, Washington is a awesome story, but Detroit's too good, especially on offense. And for Washington to handedly handle Detroit was really an amazing statement that this team really is a formidable foe to Philadelphia or whoever they play. What an amazing story they have, and what an incredible young player in Jaden Daniels, and just the potential of this program moving forward. And it doesn't miss me that this is the first year no longer under Dan Snyder.
Yeah, that needs to be said from the rooftops. But it's hard to not compare it to the RG3 run. And of course, people will say, well, he's already gotten farther than RG3 ever did. But maybe if he doesn't get hurt in that wild card playoff game, they go on a similar run. You never really know. They were really catching fire back then. But it is, not. It's usually like a Ravens Pittsburgh thing that a division rival plays 3 times, and let alone in a conference championship game. So
Yeah.
you already mentioned the Lions game. I don't know, the injuries maybe just finally caught up to Detroit. I don't know what it is. The turnovers were crazy. Do you think this was more of a Washington win or a Detroit loss? Because I feel like Detroit had it ready to go and just fumbled it.
I think I'm more on this than most people, but I think Detroit's Super Bowl was getting the number 1 seed with all the injuries that they had. I think they just accomplished so much and overcame so much to get to that spot. And then when they realized that, they climbed the mountain, and then it turns out there's another one to climb.
Yeah.
And, Washington had been rolling, and Detroit's defense was just in shambles, So not to take nothing away from Jaden, but I think if Aiden Hutchinson's there and a lot of those other guys, are healthy for the game, 45 points, I hardly, doubt that they would be able to do much better than that. But, I think it's a little bit of both, to answer your question.
Yeah, I think they ran into him at the perfect time. Like I said, they ran out of gas. They didn't really, not that they didn't know, but there was a whole nother mountain to climb, and the younger, more healthy team was more equipped to climb it than they were. Before we get to the Eagles, do you think this is do you think the window's closed on Detroit? Do you think they bounce back from this?
Only because of all the guys they have coming back, that I do think that they'll be all right. But yeah, replacing Ben Johnson is going to be huge. Whoever they get to fill him in. But Dan Campbell clearly knows what he's doing. As long as he can bring a lot of guys back and, bring in a good coordinating coaching staff, I think they'll be all right. This just another thing, that game felt a lot like, because in the NFL, sometimes you just don't have your best day.
Yeah.
And this felt like the prototypical Lions. Just a lot of weird stuff happened. The fumble, the wide receiver pass when they're driving in for the tie, the interception there. A lot of weird stuff happened to where I think Detroit wins this like 8 out of every 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
The other problem is they just, had a lot of unfortunate stuff happen in the game. And here was one of the 2 times that they'd lose it.
I agree. I think they just ran into them at the wrong time. I don't think they're done till they're going to be bottom feeders again, but there'll be a little bit of rebuild necessary. I think they're going to need to tweak a few things. But when you watch Dan Campbell's press conference, in a world of coaches that will tell you I'm not going anywhere and then up and leave a place, or interview when you're on a Super Bowl run or whatever, he actually at least cares. My sister is a Packers fan. But she texted me, is why am I getting emotional about Dan Campbell right now? I'm supposed to hate this guy. And it's hard to not love the guy. I mean, you are the biggest caveat of him amongst anyone I know. And there's no reason not to be. The guy cares. He played there, not even for a very long time, but he was there long enough to fall in love with the city and what it represents. And he's the kind of guy you root for. And I think if anybody can, pick themselves up and dust themselves off, it is someone like Dan Campbell. So it'll be interesting to see.
He did bring up last year that this might be the closest you ever get. And at the time, I thought he's probably right. And then middle of this year, I felt, oh no, this team is actually better than last year.
Yeah.
And that, that was kind of heat of the moment. And then now I'm looking back at that, and again, I'm feeling like that might have been the closest they ever get. There's something amazing about and heartbreaking about the NFL where sometimes just ball doesn't bounce your way, and some of the greatest teams we've ever seen are one and done in the playoffs. Detroit, add that to that list, because this is maybe the best team they ever had. It's
Yeah.
just unfortunate with the injuries, the ball not bouncing their way in the playoffs, facing a red hot team, and they're sitting home and probably can point at Washington, maybe at Buffalo, or maybe even all four of them, and think we're better than all these guys, and we're sitting at home this weekend.
I certainly look forward to seeing this Detroit Lions team in future iterations of the DSFL. So I'm definitely looking
That's
forward
fair.
to that when that time comes. So let's talk Eagles. I got the jersey, the game worn Asante Samuel jersey on today because that game may have shaved a year or two off my life. Not because it's hard to say, like, they played great in the elements. That game was supposed to be snow at all times. The game started, it was totally clear. It was cold, but it was clear by halftime. It was just a winter wonderland. And, it took both teams out of their element. I assumed we'd be a little more equipped to handle a snow game when you have someone like Saquon Barkley. Broke two 60-plus yard runs for touchdowns. Clearly the difference maker. Let the Rams back in it already when it looked like it was about over, but made the defensive stop at the end there when it counted. And, very stressful, but they got it done. And with the Detroit loss, the NFC Championship now goes through Philly. They get Washington one more time. This is a very, like I said, I don't know that anybody's hotter than Washington, but we've already seen with our own eyes this year that the Eagles can beat Washington. Even in the game they lost, they forced all these turnovers. Again, that was with Kenny Pickett at offense. And not that we're going to do Jaden and Jalen. That's going to screw me up for this whole bit here. But Jalen Hurts, while not playing great, this game you can put some on the weather, but they have clearly game planned around let's make it so that Hurts, I'm going to say, just to get rid of the Jalen Jaden thing, let's make Hurts have to do as little as possible here and still get the win. Whereas in past years, we're throwing it all over the yard, and there's no reason not to because you got receivers that can make that happen. But, he made a few good throws when it was necessary. We are one A.J. Brown drop away from this game getting broken open earlier. I think that's important to point out, too. I think he had 2 drops in that game. They were his first 2 drops all year, according to Football Focus.
Wow.
So, yeah, crazy. I don't know what constitutes a drop and what isn't, but that's what they have there. So this game could have easily been over sooner, and we easily could have lost it on that last possession. So at the end of the day, it's not how you win, it's that you win. And we go into NFC Championship. I don't know if it's going to snow again. I don't know what kind of conditions we're going to get here. But this one's going to be very interesting. I have confidence that we can win, but I could easily see it going either way, which is not me being on the fence. This is me not trying to discredit what Washington's done. I can only hope, and he has been unfazed to this point, but you can only hope to be a rookie in an NFC Championship game. You're going to ultimately see some stuff that you haven't seen before. Not that the moment's going to be too big, but like you outkicked your coverage already. You were a year away, but you got here this year. You can only hope that stuff like that, the experience of the Eagles is going to shine through at some point. You can only hope if you're me or other Eagles fans.
Yeah. Well, the weather is not going to be quite as crazy. It looks like it'll be in the 30s, something like that, pretty clear. So that shouldn't be much of a factor. First narrative to debunk is that Washington's the hottest team in the NFL. Like, sure they are, but the Rams were probably the second hottest team.
I agree.
And they beat them. So there's the first thing. Second is, of all the quarterbacks in conference championship weekend, Jalen Hurts may be the worst. I find that funny in the sense of statistically maybe until you look at the win column and the turnover ledger, because there's about 1 or 2 plays a quarter, even in that game against the Rams, where he will sit in the pocket too long. He'll be cautious to run. He'll be cautious to do all these things and play like a glorified Mark Sanchez. And, that's not fun or glitzy. But on Sunday, I would have taken that over Lamar's game any day, because there's something to be said about a quarterback that plays within a system and takes what the defense gives you that helps you win a lot of games. And I know that's not fun and not glitzy, but to be honest, that's what Mahomes has been doing in a lot of playoff games too, because his numbers, he'll throw 1 touchdown like he did against Houston. You there? Oh.
I am sorry about that. I agree. Okay. Like he could definitely. You actually said something that really intrigued me there. If Lamar plays more like Jalen, do you think they beat Buffalo?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I think early in that game too, we'll get to this more,
Mhm.
but I think the Ravens should have treated that first half like, let's run the ball with Derek and not have Lamar lose the game for us. They need to take a page out of Philly's playbook. And, Nick Sirianni's crazy with the shaving the head, and he's kind of a crazy character, but he's coaching like a mastermind right now because he's just taking what the defense gives him. Yeah, some of his, weird, play calls kind of, scratch my head. I remember earlier this year, believe it was against the Rams when they played in the regular season, where he would like run a draw with like a 30 seconds left, trying to get into field goal, like just stuff that like makes no sense. But in general, his philosophy of run the ball, don't let your quarterback lose the game early, let him get into a rhythm. A lot of teams should do that. And I think only really the Chiefs, Bills, and Eagles are teams that do that, where they say, we're going to run the ball and get the quarterback into the flow of the game. And to me, that's why, those teams are where they're at now.
And it's important to note, there's a very good chance that in the next week or two, we're going to learn that Josh Allen is the MVP this year. Well, Jalen Hurts threw for 128 yards in this playoff game in the snow, and Josh Allen threw for 127. So the guy that may win the MVP had a very similar game. I understand it looked different, but I think I agree. So before we get to the AFC, who do you have in the NFC?
Philly.
Yeah. I'm not going to say afraid or scared, but I fully respect this team that we're about to play. I am confident we can win. I can see it going the other way. It would not shock me because we are playing a little fast and loose with what we got going on here. But if Saquon can play that good in the snow, imagine what he can do with a trip to the Super Bowl on the line. And a part of me just feel, and this could be totally ridiculous, that because we've seen Jalen play wide open. We saw him in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. We know what he can do with his arm. Are we just simply saving that for like a do or die situation? Like, are we going to come out in this game or God forbid, the game after it, which I don't even want to jinx by saying the name of it. Are we going to come out guns a-blazing in one of those because there's 9 guys in the box to stop Barkley, and then we throw it over their head to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, who's now the Eagles' all-time receiving leader in the playoffs and only his, third year in the league? So, it could be something crazy like that. So a part of me feels we're, forcing ourselves to play one way to make people prepare for that, and then eventually, you can only run the ball so many times where you have to try a play action. And I mean that from a game plan perspective. So a part of me thinks there's this weird thing. It might not be this game. It may be, God forbid, we make it to the next game that they save it for something like that. But who knows? I could see that being the situation. But I do got Philly. I do think it's possible. It's probably even probable, but it's not guaranteed. Is where I'll leave that. AFC Championship game. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs. Josh Allen slaying one dragon against Lamar Jackson. We already talked about that a little bit. That maybe game plan could have been a little different going into that one. But they get the Chiefs at home after their game against Houston, which may have been one of the more Chiefs games of all time. The flopping, the flags. I think they're going to have to look to clean that up a bit because you can't let that happen 2 weeks in a row. The Chiefs are the worst 15-2 team I've ever seen, which I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but it's the case. Do you think Buffalo can finally pull it? They beat them in the regular season for whatever that's worth. Do you think they can finally pull it off?
Well, first, my quick recap of divisional round. Kansas City and Houston, Chiefs were the better team, but the Chiefs did get a ridiculous whistle. I mean,
Yes.
that was insane. The roughing the passers, the ball spots. People aren't talking about that. A couple of Houston ball carriers clearly had first downs that they would put a yard or two back. Another, thing. So I think Houston, if it was officiated right, would have had the ball in the fourth quarter, 2 minutes with a chance to tie or win the game. They never got that chance because I think too much weird stuff happened to where they were behind the 8 ball. And then the other game, Lamar against Josh, I just think Lamar kind of beat himself. And I think the play calling was such where they were acting like they were getting MVP Lamar. And I think they need to understand, and maybe another year, another heartbreak will help them understand. We need to play call like he is in the first half, Trent Dilfer, because the guy needs in the playoffs for some reason. He needs a quarter or two to get warmed up. I mean,
Mhm.
the stuff that he does in the first half of these games. I mean, against Tennessee, against Buffalo, against Kansas City. I mean, there's times where they fall way behind, and Lamar looks like Trent Dilfer in the first half of playoff games. So I think they need to treat him like that because I think he psychs himself out too much or something because
I
he does not look like the same guy.
I agree. I do want to make this point before I kind of lose my spot with this, but like, yes, Mark Andrews fumbled, but so did Lamar. Yes, Mark Andrews dropped a pass that could have tied the game, but the hate that man is getting is frankly gross, especially
Yeah, it's
from
ridiculous.
so-called fans for a guy that I would not hesitate to call a top 10 Raven of all time. Would not hesitate to say that. Personally, he's won me at least 2 fantasy championships. I'll say that much. But just really, you look at it, Ravens are not known historically for their like offensive firepower. So their short list of, not they haven't had people, but their list of effective offensive players, he's definitely on it. He might be a top 5 offensive player and a top 10 player period for them ever. So the treatment that he's getting is absolutely gross. And I hope, they do it right for him in the future. The fumble was weird. I don't think anyone expected like the punch out in that situation. So that
Especially
I get.
after, he juggles the snap and then he gets it,
Yeah.
It was such a weird play all the way
And he
around.
tried to cut back when he probably could have just turned up field. So like there's a lesson to be learned there. And the drop, like, it was a catchable ball, but it wasn't a perfect ball, like by any means. It was behind him to that extent. So I know we got Penny behind us having a little fun, but 11-month-old puppy. I know she looks bigger than that, but yeah, that's her
Right.
most of
Well,
the time.
before we get too far off of that, I remember the 2011 AFC Championship game when Lee Evans dropped a
Yep.
perfect pass from Joe Flacco for what would have been the winning touchdown. Mark Andrews, with 90 seconds left, dropped a tying conversion. Josh Allen would have had the ball with timeouts to win the game. And I think that I'd put, all my money on that. Like he'd figure out a way to get into field goal range with the, conference title on the line. So, that there's levels of egregious. Mark Andrews didn't have a great game, but he also had 5 big catches in that game too. So all the way around, it's crazy. But in general, to have 0 designed Lamar Jackson runs, it's like, I don't get with John Harbaugh and this coaching staff, and they've had different coordinators, but the way they treat these big games blows my mind. Like, it's like, I would rather them lose by 10 because Lamar was running too much and Derrick Henry was running too much.
Yeah.
It bugs me that they got to go another year when they have this great player that they barely use in their biggest game. Like all year when Derrick Henry would kind of split carries with Justice Hill, I figured regular season, don't want to wear him out.
Yep.
Season's over and I'm feeling like I don't think they understood who they had running the football all year. So
I will say this: Justice Hill did have a handful of good runs in this game when called upon, so he did his part.
Yeah, he's a good player.
You said it. There's levels of egregious. This isn't not handing the ball to Marshawn Lynch at the goal line egregious.
Yeah,
but it's somewhere in the it's not on the field, but it's in the same ballpark. Maybe buying a hot dog or something. It's something that you have to scratch your head and be like, yeah, just like. Again, if we make it to the to the next game here, I would have rather played, Kansas City is, what you have when you're playing against Kansas City. But if it was between, would you rather your team play Baltimore or Buffalo? I don't want to see Baltimore in there because that means they figured out their demons. And late in the third quarter, I don't want to have to tackle Derrick Henry. The same reason that guys don't want to have to chase down Saquon Barkley, midway through the fourth quarter, and why you can hit that home run to ice the game. So like Buffalo was incredibly good. They slayed one dragon. They're hoping to slay another this week. But they're beatable because they've lost, like all these teams are beatable, I guess. But like, I just don't want to tackle Derrick Henry. But if they're not going to use Derrick Henry, then sure, give me Baltimore. Then I'm really concerned. I'm going to answer this one before you. I'm going Buffalo against Kansas because if not now, when? I think it's truly at that point. If you don't figure it out now, I get this team's 15-2, but they're just not. They're a very hollow 15-2. Which again, if they win it all, it doesn't really matter. That just means they, it's. We talked about it with like the regular season not mattering in college football, and we see it in are these Chiefs just like the LeBron Lakers, where the whole game plan is just get in the playoffs and we'll see what we can make happen, or like the Warriors in that last run type thing. So I'm going Buffalo because if not now, when?
Yeah, the other thing too, which is why I'm going with Buffalo as well, and I'm a man of my all year word of Kansas City is vulnerable. And I think that game against Houston was another sign of how vulnerable they are.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's encouraging is that Buffalo's getting healthier, and you brought it up, about Von Miller. It's amazing how he's still playing the way that he is.
Yeah.
Matt Milano's healthy now. And the guys they got, on offense are starting to jive. A lot of them, looking very good going into this weekend. The crazy thing about Buffalo is not only did they beat the Ravens on Sunday, but it almost looked like they went into a little cruise control where it's like, we got the lead, not quite the Eagles cruise control. That was amazing, their fourth quarter cruise control. But for the Bills, it was like, we got the lead, let's run the ball. They had 10 designed Josh Allen runs. Let's just play solid defense. Don't let anything get behind us. And, that was amazing to me about the fact that they won that game, by playoff standards, easier than you would expect going in. So that, to me, is a sign that the Bills are a really strong team. They already beat the Chiefs once. It's hard to beat a team twice, especially when the final game is in their house. But this Bills team looks pretty good. And I think, the Chiefs, part of the reason why I'm not super confident in them is that they were able to move the ball against Houston with Travis Kelce. And the Bills might be as good a matchup as there is. They got a couple of nice linebackers led by Milano. That front seven's good. The coordinator good. I think the Bills are a hard matchup against the Chiefs, and they'll get it done.
I agree. You mentioned their cruise control. I had this thought during the game. Who would have thought that James Cook would have a better NFL career than Dalvin Cook? It's his older brother.
That is
he was
crazy.
As amazing as he was in college. And he was very good for the Vikings for a lot of years. But, he clearly might have it separated there. So we both agree, I guess. We're both going Buffalo and
Crazy.
Philly. What are the odds of that, right? So the only thing that's left to do is wait and see. So I want to thank Nick for coming on here. Thank you guys for checking this out. Enjoy Conference Championship Week, and we'll see you next time.